Medieval Chronicles presents, for centuries, love was not something people expected to understand. It was endured, feared, prayed against, or survived in silence. In the Middle Ages, love rarely belonged to lovers. Marriages were contracts. Affection was secondary. Desire was dangerous, and longing, especially female longing, was almost never allowed a voice. And then, in the late 13th century, a book appeared, a strange book, a beautiful book, a controversial book, a book that did not tell people who to love, but taught them how love worked. It was called The Romance of the Rose, and it quietly transformed the emotional imagination of medieval Europe. Before the rose, love as fate, duty, or sin. To understand why this book mattered, we must first understand what love looked like before it existed. For most medieval people, love was not a private emotion. It was a social function. Marriage was arranged to secure land, alliances, or stability. Romantic attachment was unpredictable and therefore suspect. Sexual desire was tolerated within marriage and condemned outside it. Love poetry existed, but it was carefully stylized, distant, and symbolic. Even courtly love, the refined love of troubadours, was less about intimacy than performance. The lover suffered. The beloved remained distant, and desire was never meant to be fulfilled. Love was something that happened to you, not something you explored, until the rose opened. A dream, a garden, and a locked flower. The romance of the rose begins not as a sermon or a moral guide, but as a dream. The narrator falls asleep and finds himself walking into a walled garden, a symbolic space of beauty, danger, and temptation. Inside the garden, everything is alive with meaning. Joy dances, courtesy smiles, youth laughs, but outside the walls, carved into stone, are the enemies of love: hatred, greed, old age, envy. At the center of the garden stands a rosebud. The rose is not subtle. It represents the beloved, her body, her affection, her consent, and the entire poem becomes the story of approaching the rose, not conquering it, not stealing it, but learning how desire works. This was revolutionary because for the first time, love was not framed as fate or sin, but as a process. Love as psychology, not destiny. What made The Romance of the Rose so influential was not its plot, but its method. Love, in this poem, is dissected. Personified characters argue inside the lover's mind. Reason warns him. Desire urges him forward. Fear paralyzes him. Hope sustains him. This was something medieval readers had never seen before. Love was no longer a divine mystery, it became psychological. Readers recognized themselves in these inner debates. They saw their own hesitation, obsession, jealousy, and longing reflected on the page. For the first time, love was something one could analyze. And once love could be analyzed, it could be learned. From Guillaume de Loris to Jean de Meun. A turning point, the poem was written in two very different halves. The first, by Guillaume de Loris, is lyrical, gentle, idealistic. Love is refined. The beloved is distant but radiant. Patience and humility are rewarded. Then, decades later, Jean de Meun continues the poem, and everything changes. Jean de Meun turns the romance into a philosophical battlefield. Characters argue about sex, marriage, women, power, hypocrisy, and nature. Love becomes political. Sex becomes unavoidable. And idealism collapses into realism. For some readers, this was shocking. for others, liberating. But together, the two halves formed something unprecedented. A complete anatomy of desire, from innocence to disillusionment. Why? Everyone read it. The Romance of the Rose was not a marginal text. It became the most copied, most read, most debated secular work of the Middle Ages. Nobles read it. Clerics read it. Students memorized it. Poets imitated it. Chaucer translated it into English. Dante knew it. Christine de Pizan fiercely attacked. For nearly 2 centuries, it shaped how people talked about love. If you wanted to sound intelligent about desire, you quoted the rose. If you wanted to seduce, you learned its language. If you wanted to criticize love, you argued with it. It became the emotional grammar of Europe, teaching people how to desire. Perhaps the most radical thing about the Romance of the Rose is that it assumes desire needs education. Love is not pure, not innocent, not self-explanatory. It is learned through observation, imitation, error, and suffering. This idea would echo through literature for centuries. The lover is shaped by love and also wounded by it, and that felt true. Medieval readers did not simply read the poem, they used it. It gave them metaphors, strategies, warnings, justifications. Love became something one could talk about without confessing it. Women, power, and controversy. But the Rose also created a crisis. Jean de Meun's continuation portrayed women as manipulative, dangerous, and deceptive. Female desire was framed as something to control or fear. This sparked one of the first major literary debates in European history. Christine de Pizan, a woman writer in a male-dominated world, publicly condemned the poem. She argued that it shaped men to disrespect women, that it taught cruelty under the guise of philosophy, that literature had moral responsibility. This debate was not just about poetry. It was about how love should be imagined, and whether stories had the power to shape behavior. They did. The legacy we still live with even today. We inherit the Rose's vision of love, the idea that love is a journey, that desire is psychological, that inner conflict defines intimacy, that romance involves strategy, uncertainty, and self-discovery. Modern novels, romantic comedies, even dating culture, all echo the medieval realization that love is not accidental, it is narrated. The Romance of the Rose did not invent love, but it taught people how to think about it. And once people began thinking about love, they could no longer return to silence. A book that changed the inner world. The Middle Ages are often remembered as rigid, religious, and emotionally restrained. But this book tells another story, a story of people trying to understand their feelings, trying to name desire, trying to reconcile body and soul. The Romance of the Rose did not free medieval lovers, but it gave them language, and language changes everything. Because once love can be spoken, it can be questioned, desired, resisted, or and that is how a book written as a dream reshaped how an entire civilization learned to love. If a book written 7 centuries ago can still recognize our desires, perhaps love has not changed as much as we imagined. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing. More forgotten books, more lost voices, and more histories of the human heart are waiting here.